But let's bring on the speakers for the panel, because a lot of
let's do
people
it.
are watching worldwide. I mean, I'm in an office here with the Hurtaks are in another room, and they have about 40, 50 people in there watching as a watch party, including welcome everyone watching online. And this is a really great hand-picked panel here. Was there someone else? Oh yeah, where is JJ and Desiree? Hopefully they'll be able to jump in.
I'm looking for them right now because they might be under Desiree.
They might be under
Go ahead
new
there. I got them.
Okay, great. Okay, let me just introduce the panel, and we'll probably pick up where I left off with Kathleen and Grant today in our discussions, that the phenomena as we have known it is shifting. The phenomena meaning, there they are, JJ and Desiree Hurtak.
Here's me.
Okay, so I was just introducing everybody. Thanks for joining us. I know there's a lot of people, a lot of your people watching from the Keys of Enoch Academy for Future Science. So I was saying that the phenomena seems to be shifting. Yes, it's not just, oh, there's ships out there. What is the purpose? What is its interaction with human consciousness? And it's like the government is always one step behind. It's like, oh yeah, people are going to a new way of looking at it. And now they're coming out with this disclosure that yes, we do have crashed UFOs. They do exist. So we're trying to balance a new way of looking at the whole picture and how we, or some of us as experiences, can lead the way to new realities. That's the name of my show. I like to plug it, New Realities. That's what we're going into. So let me introduce the panelists. We have Grant Cameron, who's, and as I introduced you earlier, Grant, you really went from understanding hardware, like the phenomena itself when you had your sighting to, you know, and then you were tracking the relationships every president had with UFOs, and you have the presidential UFO website where you can trace that. But then there was this awakening with you, and you said, or you thought, and you say that it wasn't about the hardware, it's about consciousness, it's about the experiencers. And that was a huge plus for this movement, I feel. Because you're such a great researcher and you're so enthusiastic to suddenly see it from a different perspective. And we'll get into that too. Thanks for being here. Then we have next to Grant, Kathleen Martin. And as I said, she was, wait, we had some feedback there, Desiree. Okay. Kathleen was brought into the phenomena almost unwillingly, and Betty Hill was abducted. Really, the first recognized abduction case in 1961, I think it was September 19th. There's actually a plaque on the side of the road in New Hampshire put up by the state of New Hampshire that says, this is where Betty and Barney Hill were taken by aliens in 1961. It's official. I mean, you get states recognizing this. So Kathleen was aware of that at 14, and she's grown up with the phenomena, and is her own experience, but a great researcher. She has many books. She has a few books with Stanton Friedman, who's really the godfather of ufology. He's no longer with us, but Kathleen's bringing, you know, keeping us all up to date. Kathleen, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I know.
And we have my good friend, Adam Apollo. What a mind on this. He's the next wave of researchers and scientists and conscious awakened beings. I mean, he includes so much in his research of consciousness and biology, DNA, transformation, new technologies. I'm really looking forward to hearing more from you today, Adam.
Thanks for having me, Alan. Good to be here with you.
And we have my good friends and my hosts, and they have a room full of people watching them, and they're really a dynamic duo. They look at the linguistics, they look at the music, they look at the consciousness, they look at science, they look at spirituality, and they're great spiritual teachers, and they're tour the world giving information. And some of the basic core teachings is that we are not alone. We're part of a cosmic brotherhood that is reaching out to us and looking to unite with this for humanity to unite with this greater phenomenon. So why don't you guys kick it off and tell us, JJ and Desiree, your perspective on this new time we're moving into as the UFO phenomenon becomes mainstream, it becomes accepted, and self-evident is a word Adam used today, and you're absolutely right, Adam. It is self-evident. So what does that mean for all of us?
Well, I just want to make sure everyone can hear us, but we're excited to be here and have such a great team with us. We feel we are really on the cusp of making a great leap forward. You know, the government is starting to release information. We know from the 2017 event connected with the Nimitz, and then they allowed the Navy personnel to come forward. I did that in 2019, allow the Navy personnel to come forward and say what they saw. And because they've been watching a lot. I mean, these things are not just a one little UFO event. These things are, you know, happening over weeks and sometimes months that the Navy's seen them. And in addition to that, then of course, during the COVID, which is April 27th, 2020, that what was amazing is that the Pentagon came out and said, yes, the Nimitz was a real experience. So we feel the reason they're doing this is not because, you know, they're afraid someone's going to leak something. It's because they're being seen all over the world. If I can also add that the Center for UFO Studies, Peter Davenport, came out and said that even in 2019, there was a 50% increase in sightings. I think this is so exciting.
So this is the time to adjust our eyesight. 2020 is opening a whole new door. We're opening a page to the importance of consciousness, realizing that we are multidimensional beings growing up in a vast and awesome universe, and we need to go beyond the nuts and bolts, the traditional paradigms of extraterrestrial science, into something that involves more of the interdimensional aspects of consciousness. And this is the key to a quantum change. We believe that this closure is just the beginning of something that's even more dynamic, realizing that the human evolution is part of a higher evolutionary process, and the end product will be that we as a human species will enter into a family of nations. We will be cosmic citizens if we go through this with a sense of depth, compassion, and higher wisdom rather than simple ET phenomena.
Right. Well, we're definitely going to go deeper into that understanding, because this is where I think all of us kind of converge into a common understanding. This is something Grant's been working with for a long time. Grant, why don't you do a little intro to how consciousness has sort of replaced the idea of hardware and where we're moving into as our relationship to what's been called UFOs change. Oh, we have to unmute Grant. Neil.
They're all on mute. Okay. I only sort of stick with what's happened to me, the sort of the awakening that I had, and look at it from that perspective that in some ways I think I'm being led. I'll give you an example. Ray Hernandez, who started the Free Foundation, when I had my download experience in February 26, 2012, where I was basically told this is consciousness, and it became very clear it was this how it works. That was almost exactly the same time, within days, of when Chris Bledsoe encountered what he called the Lady in Light. It was a week before Ray Hernandez had the healing experience with his dog. And so Ray started to talk about this, and he went out and he wanted to know what's this. He believed, because he had this experience where he called in the ship and the ship came and stuff like that. And he said, there's some sort of consciousness thing going on here. So he starts doing Google searching or whatever, and he comes up with my name because I had said the consciousness was part of it. And then I said to him, well, I'm going to be lecturing in Sebring, Florida on consciousness. Why don't you come down and watch the lecture, and we'll talk about your experience and bring your wife and whatever. So we had a conversation, and it was 2 or 3 days after that lecture, that Ray went back and he had this experience where he's on the freeway, where he goes out of body, where he gets taken, and they basically say to him, it's consciousness, and there's all these things, whether it's quantum physics or paranormal phenomena, psychic phenomena, remote viewing, quantum, everything, and it's all connected by consciousness. Now that happened a couple days later. So when I look at the things I see, the events that happened to me, I think this is not by accident. It's almost like I'm a big Michael Newton fan. That was one of the big experiences I had. And Michael Newton did 7,000 regressions, where he talks about we come into the world to learn certain things, and it's all the same stuff. We pick the good stuff, the bad stuff, to learn stuff. And when I looked at it that way, I always see it like we may have had a meeting. All of us had a meeting before we came in that we were going to do this kind of stuff. And so when I hear like Kathy Martin talking, and I see this move by Kathy Martin and MUFON to move away from the nuts and bolts and to talk to the experiencers, I basically say, I mean, that to me is like, wow, I just couldn't believe that this was going on, that everybody seemed to be on the same path, that we're moving away from this sort of materialistic paradigm. And so is quantum physics. The more you look at quantum physics, the more it gets really weird and starts to look. And then you get Edgar Mitchell talking about the holographic universe and all these different theories about it being a big, or Jacques Vallée's statement, it may be just a giant kabuki theater, and all it is that we are not alone. So that's the way I look at it, in terms of the things are developing so fast for me. So I just sit in the flow, and basically I get told what to do. I mean, they give me stuff. There's all these synchronicities, and I had this very direct experience in 2017, which just altered my whole life. This 24 things that were given to me, almost like the Hurtaks. When you get into the field and you believe this is for real, and you get shown a bunch of stuff and this is for real, your whole life changes, and that's where you've got to go. So I just follow myself. I really don't follow too much of what other people are doing, but I see a lot of the flow is going in the direction that I made. So as I said, in 2012, I didn't know anything about consciousness. I couldn't have spelled consciousness, and I couldn't have cared less. And I got dragged into this thing, kicking and screaming. And I've realized that I just have to sit back and go with the flow. And I'm given what I'm being given.
Wow. No, Grant, I know you are, and you have the intelligence to start to put together the pieces, which is what everyone here is trying to do. You mentioned Kathleen Martin, and actually I want to ask you, Kathleen, someone said in the chat here, is it possible that the government is preparing us for a fake invasion, and which will bring full disclosure, space program, all that? I mean, I can also ask Grant that, but what do you think, Kathleen, about why disclosure is happening now, what it says about the evolution, and is the government smart enough to bring about a fake invasion? Or looking, wait, unmute Kathleen, Neil.
Do it.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay.
And talk about it in terms of consciousness, if you can.
Talk about what?
Well, if you could put the whole framework in terms of what consciousness is.
Okay. In terms of why the government is coming forward with information now, I think that Lou Elizondo is the one who started this and wasn't willing to remain with the ATIP program because of the excessive secrecy and because of the small amount of money that was being channeled into that program. It needed much greater and expansive investigation, and it was not happening. And so I give him a lot of credit for where we're going with all of this. And then Tom DeLonge, of course, who received permission from the military to form the organization into the Stars Academy. And so that, I think, began the process of bringing us forward, along with the former military people, intelligence people, and military intelligence and scientists who are part of that. And I think that they've been instrumental in working with the military services and the Pentagon in order to move this forward. Then we had the issue of the tic-tac, of the orbs, of the square with the ball in the middle, with the typical disc that was photographed back in 1950. And again, later in the 50s by a military gun camera from one of our planes in France. So there's been a very long history here. And it appears that there is an effort being made now to protect our military people, because when they're out on maneuvers and these craft are showing up, the military is saying, well, this is a danger. These craft pose a danger. And so it's a good thing that they've started to allow the members of the military to report the craft when they see them.
Well, maybe
So-
they weren't so much a danger as trying to, this is my opinion, force the hand of the military to come forward and say something's happening, you know?
Well, I think that the craft are probably doing that because, I mean, they're always there. They're in great numbers over a long period of time. Even off the East Coast, when the Navy maneuvers were taking place there, when the ship went overseas, the UAPs followed. The Navy also says that it is the change in terminology, that the old terminology, UFO, was unacceptable. It was a loaded term, and going to the terminology UAP is more acceptable to them.
Right.
That
It was
takes
a branding issue. They wanted to rebrand the phenomena and make it more acceptable.
And
right?
that takes me back to 1952, when
Wow.
Major General John A. Sanford said that the only thing in the work that can explain these things is phenomena.
Mhm.
And so there was an effort back then to call this phenomena. Now they've finally
One more
changed.
question. Where do you think it's going? Where do you think the phenomenon is going at this point?
I think that our military wants their technology, and knowing that any country in the world who had that technology could rule the world, and we're still a society, a militaristic society based on world dominance. Unfortunately, the people who are involved in this movement have a different attitude. And I think that that attitude is beginning to transfer from our country into other countries, to other groups. And hopefully there will be a different message that is going to be adopted by people around the world.
Well, I think what Grant has always said, it's the experiencers that's going to lead the way. So thank you. I'll come back to you, Kathleen, but I will take it to Adam Apollo to kind of wrap this little segment up in terms of consciousness, technology, the future, and the destiny of human civilization. Is that easy?
Sure, Alan. Yeah, I'll just wrap that up in a sentence or two. No problem.
Right.
No, it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you. You know, I first met Stephen Greer back in 2001 after the National Press Club conference in Washington, D.C. And, you know, I was particularly struck by certain testimonies of the people that were in that early group of the Disclosure Project, including Bonnie Holmes, who was assistant to Dr. Werner von Braun and who very clearly communicated his concerns from his deathbed about the 4 cards that might be played by the military-industrial complex. Those including, of course, terrorism was card number 3, and the 4th card was the extraterrestrial threat. So I don't pretend to, you know, avoid or deny the reality that some form of disclosure could be utilized in order to weaponize space. I definitely wouldn't put it past the current kind of structure of Space Force in this country to do something like that. But in foundation to all of this, consciousness really is the big factor, right? Because as I was speaking at the White House and UN and in the years just following my first massive contact experience, meeting the Galactic Council in 2005, I was encountering a lot of people, you know, inside Obama White House and inside the United Nations, people working as aides, nonpartisan based people who had already kind of woken up to the reality that we need a complete architecture change in our system in order to better coordinate, operate as a global community, and thus in transition as a planetary community relating to a galactic network of different species. And this actually requires some huge changes in thinking at deep fundamental levels, including the healing of major traumas, because as we know, if we block out parts of our past or we lie about parts of our past, those lies and those denial points actually become the shells that keep us from full self-knowledge and understanding of how to navigate to a place of real resolution. And there's tons of wounds that have happened on this planet, and especially here in the North American continent, that still are kind of under that shell of denial. And the more we're able to actually really accept that shadow and look at that pain and really accept those parts of ourselves, the more we begin to actually experience the transformation within to the state that we actually need to be in harmony with our global community. So, you know, that's a little tidbit on this piece. And I'll just go a little further to kind of wrap the sort of sacred thread around this conversation by saying that, you know, the family that I've been in touch with for many, many years, I've been in deep contact with a lot of star families for about 15 years, studying their hardware and also getting the information about their software and their consciousness and their application of culture and the different cultural narratives that have grown up on these different planets to enable them to be peaceful interstellar societies. And one thing that I can say really foundationally is true for all of them is they all have a sort of sense about open source as being a mechanism for how we can generate peace and sustainability with each other. And when I say open source, what I mean is that as we innovate and as we progress, we should be sharing our innovations. We should be sharing our consciousness and our growth with each other. And I still don't see that happening a lot in our own governing structure here in the United States. I've seen it happen a little bit more in different countries throughout Europe, more open templating of how can we create more open and equitable systems that support everybody involved? How do we come together as a community and create a system that serves all life, and not even just human life, but our biospheres, which we cannot live without, you know, the animals and the plants on our planet, which we cannot live without. And so there's a foundational thread there, and also many other threads that have a lot to do with recognizing the inherent capacity of us as human beings, that we are telepathic, that we are immersed in a connective field that expands the entire universe and thus have access to the information network of the universe, that we can travel faster than light, and that we can replicate material objects by understanding their vibrational compositions to transform our economic systems the same way Gene Roddenberry envisioned.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. You're absolutely right. I think the change starts with the people. We can't wait for the politicians to establish change. But just tell me, are you calling us from Starfleet Command? What is that? You want to
yeah, this is my planetary dashboard starship deck. I like to have it up because it's the vision of the peace room that I see us really working from here in the next 10 years. And I'm building this system that allows peer-to-peer communications between people on the planet for security and sovereignty, and as well as tons of creative tools to change economy around the arts. And this dashboard sort of evokes some of the essence of the energy of the future sort of visualization systems that we need to understand how we navigate here on planet Earth.
Great. I love it. Thanks so much for joining us today. So why don't we go back to the Hurtaks and, you know, Adam.
Yeah. Hey, JJ and Desiree, by the way, good to see you guys.
Adam, you're great.
Thank
You
you.
represent the Adamic extension of life.
I got the keys of Enoch actually hidden behind that glass panel right there.
Well, Gene Roddenberry was part of our team of meditation years ago in Ossining, New York. We were there with astronaut not astronaut Mitchell, but
Edgar.
Dr. Andre Puharich, who worked with astronaut
Andre.
Mitchell.
Got it.
We were doing telepathic communications in the Middle East, trying to bring peace in situations of war and violence. And suddenly a sphere of light appeared in Dr. Puharich's study, and everybody was rather amused by it and suddenly realized it was something for real. And Andrea took time to tell Gene Roddenberry, well, you're right about these things, now it's happening. So let's all gear up for this great change that's coming. So we have to fasten our seatbelts. We're beginning to really go beyond the whispers of the universe into the real dialogue. And that's why we're all together. It's a positive orientation that we can go through if we overcome our fear, our isolation, and our doubt.
And if I can add on, in terms of consciousness, I think what's really unique is that everyone who's had some, even a slight bit of sightings, or especially maybe one-to-one third encounters of the close encounters of the third kind, there's a inductive linkage, as we call it, with these other levels of intelligence. And I know that that's what Grant was talking about. And I know Catherine Martin has dealt with this a lot in her work with experiencers. And I think that's also where Alan would like to take this whole panel, because it goes beyond the nuts and bolts, which is what, thank goodness, MUFON was able to do with Kathleen and others who had helped move that beyond. But we really are getting more in touch, where really, I even say on the grassroots level, you know, we know what gas station to pull into right now, or we know what food store or when to go, and we know all this stuff because that's how we work and that's how they work. That's the most important thing. They all work by this communication, and it's really telepathic, it's remote viewing, it's whatever you want to call it. And we all have that potential. Even if you don't see a UFO, you still have the potential, I think, to tap into your higher consciousness, which is also seeking to tell you and help you while you're here.
So in short, we're going beyond the five senses. We're going into a new aspect of understanding human evolution as being connected with the cosmic family. And now we must be, shall we say, positive enough to make those realities happen globally for all humanity that wishes to take the higher path. Positive futures require positive thinking, require the nakedness and the openness of the human heartbeat.
Right. No, I totally agree with everything you're saying and what you brought up, and then Adam brought up, and everyone here. Once you even see a UFO or even have a dream connection, your life, your consciousness has shifted to something else. You, as Grant says, you're pulled down the rabbit hole, and everything changes because you know what we've been conditioned to think, the brainwashing, the limited view is not what it appears to be. There's a bigger reality that we open up to. Do you care to share anything about that, Desiree and JJ?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, and you're absolutely right. And the first step in, we'll say, consciousness awakening to what's taking place on the planet, and what we feel is actually the fifth seal of the book of Revelation, is being open to understanding another reality exists. But also for those that have actually had that connection, actually seen certain other levels of intelligence, there is also this direct connection, this inductive linkage. I know, just to say on a basic level, a friend of mine, and this is back in the 70s, she had contact with beings that were in the Bermuda Triangle. And, you know, they at some point told her, okay, enough is enough. You know, you've seen enough about us, you know, go on back and don't tell everybody about this. Well, she was sitting with friends of ours in their kitchen, and all of a sudden she started talking about this and saying more and more that she shouldn't have said. And literally a shelf flew upwards. It had been in this kitchen forever, and things flew kind of backwards off of it. And she goes, oh, I can't say anymore. And it's just an example. It's not a negative thing. I'm not trying to say any of that is negative. I'm saying that there is this constant contact, if I can call it that, for the internet, that you know, is there with all of us once we've had that connection. And it's usually very positive and very helpful, but you don't need it. But you know, you can do it with your own higher self. I think that's also important.
Right. I think just listening to this conversation, if you're new to this or, you know, curious about this, already plants seeds of change, just the way Kathleen overheard her mother talking to her Aunt Betty Hill, like, wow, that's a lot to take in. And this is what you're talking about, Grant. You're saying there's no coincidences. There's no like, oh, you happen to just see a UFO. Talk about that level of intelligence where maybe you could say everyone watching this program is being coded to an awakened consciousness. Would you go that far and say that? Or
Well, yeah, that's where I like, if you go to the Michael Newton stuff, and I asked Kathy Martin about this one time about the soul contract idea. I mean, do we agree to come in here and do certain things? I mean, or is it a random sort of a phenomena? Well, what I see with the intelligence, when I listen to the experiences, like you get Bashar says, the one is the all are the one. You get the tall gray on the one ship. They asked him, what's your concept of God? He said, we are one with the one who is all. That appears to be the number one message that I think that they're trying to get across. The way I had it in my noetic experience in 2017 was the idea that everything works together. Like we have been taught this thing about survival of the fittest, that we're separate, we're against each other, to fight against each other. And I think the main message that they're trying to bring across is they are us, we are them, that everything, if you work together, whatever you do to Gaia, you think it's independent. I can dump stuff in the river. You realize everything's together, that we are basically like 80 trillion cells all in the human body, and they all work together. And we're working in the opposite direction, where we're saying, I'll do what I want, don't tell me what to do. I'm up against you, where it's survival of the fittest and stuff like that. And I think that's the main message they want us to get, is that we are all part of this one thing, and that we all have to vibrate together, that whatever I do, it's like it's just a cell in the body. If a cell goes rogue and decides it's going to do whatever it wants to do, that's a cancer cell. And we basically have a situation that they're trying to reverse, is the idea that we are all together, and whatever we do, like was brought up with Kathy Martin earlier, was when you detonate an atomic bomb, it goes through the entire universe. It's not just, we say it doesn't affect anybody else, I can do what I want, don't tell me to, and we get upset because they're shutting down the nuclear weapons, and this is a threat. And I say, we should give them the Nobel Prize every single year for that. I mean, if they're actually doing that kind of stuff. And I think that's the main message they want us to get across, is this oneness message, that we're all connected. And if we work together, it's like, and people don't like the analogy of the beehive, but you have the beehive thing where everybody's doing their job, everybody's put in what you can, take out only what you need. That, I think, is the main message that they're trying to get across to us. And whether we get it or not, I don't know. I mean, it's all going to be experience. We learn from the bad things, we learn from the good things, probably more from the bad things. And I think that's basically what's going on here, is they're trying to get across this message. And I think even in the free survey, it shows that 54% of people said oneness and love were the main messages that they got when they're on board the ship. And I think we can't forget that this idea of oneness in the universe is a key principle that I think they want us to know.
beautiful. I think that's actually what the whole Portal Ascension 5-day summit's been about. And it also says, feels to me, each one of us is important. Each of what we think and feel and put out towards the collective is as important as anybody. So it brings the responsibility for this planetary awakening to each one of us. So Kathleen, how does that contact experience also connect to what you're studying, the near-death experiences and that relationship to the greater mind?
The experience that is most common for people who have been on craft and also for near-death experiences is the feeling of unconditional love. On craft, the entities look into your eyes, they project the most intense feeling of love that any human could ever experience. It's nothing like human love. It is much, much more powerful. And so that love is a tremendous thing for all of us. And with that love comes consciousness. And they do say that we're all part of one consciousness. And people who have had near-death experiences, people who have had experiences with non-human entities, believe, if they've received these messages, that we share one consciousness. Experiencers of both types, after they have their first experience, are changed. That change takes place where they now view themselves as being part of something much, much larger. Not that they're just part of a family or a town or even part of a country or this planet, that we're all part of something much greater than ourselves.
What do you say to the people who talk about invasions, takeover? I mean, I don't believe it, but there's a lot of people in that camp saying that, you know, we shouldn't trust them. And, you know, there have been abductions, but people have resolved, like Sherry Wild just said, they resolve their abduction to see it on a higher level. But what do you say to those people and the government who want, you know, us to be in fear, the advanced space threat program, right? Isn't that what they call it, threat? So what do you say to those people based on this experience? How can we convince them that it's not what the propaganda says it is?
Well, what I usually say when asked is fear sells. And those who are attempting to make a lot of money off the topic of UFOs and aliens project the image that this is something to be feared, that they're going to take over our planet, that they're going to enslave us. Some even say that there's a base and they're eating humans. You know, fear does sell. And if this is going on, I want to see the evidence of it, because people who are really having these experiences, for the most part, the greatest percentage are looking at it differently, not as being something that's exploitative or something to be feared, but something to grow with.
Right. No, that is so important. I think that is the common experience, definitely in near-death events, and for most of the abductees who then say, wow, maybe there's something else going on. So thank you, Kathleen, for adding that, because your lifetime of experience, really starting at 14, is so valuable to add to the unfolding of a new story. So I appreciate that. And Adam, you were sort of born into a world where all this was self-evident, right? I mean, it's like, let's go to the next level. And so talk about where you're coming from and some of the technology and some of how the technology deals with consciousness and how it's going to be of amazing benefit to the human race.
Sure, Alan. Yeah, I mean, when I was a little kid in the 80s when E.T. came out, and I think that movie had a message that was very powerful and against the grain of what had been well propagated by massive disinformation campaigns rolled out during the time of post the War of the Worlds radio episode and Roswell, and a lot of things started happening. Secret space programs started getting developed, and then there was extremely well organized campaigns to try to cover up alien reproduction vehicle development, as they call them, ARVs. And that involved, you know, making fun of little green men and kind of creating the stereotypical view of the being, which really is modeled after a Zeta Reticuli gray that has became this sort of stereotypical alien flying saucers, and everybody that talks about it is crazy. And we've moved almost entirely out of that age now, and there's a much wider spectrum of understanding about different kinds of beings from different worlds. I still find a lot of people kind of make the mistake of assuming that these beings are just vibrating at higher frequency levels and that they're not physical, or that they didn't actually evolve on planets and they didn't actually, you know, drink water and build ships to travel and figure out these things. But a lot of that misunderstanding is common because we don't necessarily see proficiency with the ability to communicate on the astral, to project our consciousness to other planets, to talk telepathically, to do a lot of the things that are kind of baseline tech, you know, for being part of a galactic society, because you cannot use radio waves and send a signal to another star that's 4 light years away if we're talking the Sirian system, or 430 light years away if we're talking the Pleiadian system, you know, and expect them to get the message anytime soon, right? So you have to use consciousness and our innate natural abilities to communicate faster than light, superluminally, as a foundation for beginning to build a galactic communications network. And then, of course, that plays a very serious role in how we actually apply consciousness to building our own technology, right? Because the internet is really the first glimpse at that. Just the idea that I can, suddenly receive a message on this device in my pocket from someone anywhere in the world at any time. This is like a little reflection of telepathy. And anybody that's out there, that has a cell phone, and this used to happen to me when we just had landlines when I was in high school, and me and my friends would be like, how is it possible that you could think of somebody and then they call you on the phone, right? Like, what is the mechanism for that? And now that we have cell phones, it happens all the time. You talk about someone, they text you. You think about someone, boom, there's an email, and the next thing you know, you take it for granted, and you forget to actually go through the moment of adjustment where you say, oh, wow, like I actually am interconnected with all of these people that I have this deep relationship with. I can actually feel them through my heart. I can have emotional exchange. And any mother in the audience knows exactly what I'm talking about, because I know you know exactly what your kid is feeling wherever they are in the house or at school or whatever, because you just pick it up. And so these kinds of adjustments to the way that we accept the innate abilities that we have and our capacity to be telepathic, our capacity to interact with the field. These are things that become foundations for the technology of the future, including, by the way, levitation. My stepmother was highly spiritual, amazing woman. All she'd talk about is divine love all the time. And one day my dad and my stepbrothers caught her levitating next to a lake. She didn't have any idea she was doing it. She was just sitting there in prayer, and her body was floating 3 feet above the ground. Wow. And she just said, I was just talking to the angels. I was just wrapped in love. But that right there just shows that there's different states of our being in which we occupy our own space-time, so to speak, and the effects of gravitational forces around us fall away. And the same is true if you've ever practiced astral travel or remote viewing. It's now very well proven by groups like Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Group and others. But it's quite fun, and it's quite easy to anytime just project your thought or your mind to another location. And the better we get at that, the more proficiency we're building to become the pilots of the future of the galactic society.
Talk about the future a little bit. What does the future look like when all this comes online and there's a new society that is functional?
Sure. Well, there's 3 major areas of transition that are really critical. And I like to speak to them because they're really the areas where we're pushing the edge of technology development right now as well. And that is energy systems, right? As soon as you have localized, free, and abundant energy systems, suddenly there's a massive amount of global infrastructure that's no longer needed. All those power lines, all those giant power stations, all the oil and gas war and control systems, a lot of that breaks down immediately, and that's a major spinning in a new direction that starts occurring. Now, the second phase is what I call molecular realignment or replication, as Gene Roddenberry called it. And that's really about understanding, and we're already doing this, by the way, with laser interferometers. We're building gemstones one molecule at a time. We're building matter one molecule at a time. Lots of people have 3D printers at home, and they're printing matter in different ways. This is just version 1, right? You can think of it as the gigantic, ugly computers that we had, 25 years ago or whatever. And as we get better at it, we learned that we can actually record at the Planck scale of space-time the actual energetic information of a structure. So you can duplicate an apple. And by the way, it's just as healthy and just as delicious and just as full of life force as the apple that grew on the tree. Now, this is not to replace farming or our care for the earth, but this is about creating the abundance of resource and material that we need to completely change the system of resourcing for everyone on the planet, ending poverty, ending all of these major resource needs, and having, of course, the energy to purify water and produce food and do all the things we need to do to get in balance. Now, the third major stage is faster than light technology, superluminal travel. There's a reason why I called my company Superluminal Systems, and it's because I'm an avid researcher and developer in this space. And I know we can do it. And I know that we're going to develop the mechanisms to do it within the next 10 to 15 years at the most. And as soon as you realize how you can create a standing wave gravitational field around an object so that there's no longer acceleration that's warping space-time around an object, you can jump to different places in the universe. And what that does is it's going to completely change the boundary conditions of nation states on this earth, because borders are going to pretty much evaporate as soon as that goes down. And also it opens the door for humanity to really spread across the universe. I kind of like to think of it as Gaia's like orgasm, giving the beautiful seed of humanity to the rest of the galaxy, which has happened actually in a couple phases in earlier Earth development as well. But in this one, it's really big because our population density requires that by people actually going and living on other worlds and developing capacity to do so, we can actually really work to rebalance our biospheres, turn our cities green, build starports all over the place. And, you know, as far as I'm concerned, I think that we're gonna see Earth become the paradise that we all envision, the heaven on earth that we witness. But it truly requires coming from our hearts and dedicating ourselves to the principles that enable that true level of sovereignty and freedom for every single person on the planet.
Wow, that is amazing. That is a future worth having. And thanks for laying it out, because I think all of us sense that's possible. And we're just going through this very difficult birth canal here to that future, but I think we're going to make it. And the work of the Hurtaks are all about that. Future science is what they call their foundation. So talk about that, JJ and Desiree. Also, I want to ask you, there's such resistance to everything Adam and Grant and Kathleen have said about love and this great technology. How do we overcome that very like stuck place within the consciousness that we're part of, but that those that want to control the system don't want to have happen? I mean, it's ridiculous. Like they're searching for radio waves out in space, and we're already way beyond radio. But scientist says, well, we're not getting any signal. Anyway, it's just so fixed and stuck. How do we overcome that and move forward to the future Adam talked about?
Adam has given us a great vision of the future. And as we accelerate, of course, there's going to be the skeptics who will say this is just a pie in the sky. This is pseudoscience that we're speculating about the realm of consciousness. And I want to remind our world audience that Desiree and I had the privilege to co-author with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher of Lawrence Livermore and Berkeley this book entitled Mind Dynamics in Space and Time, which is the real X-Files of how the top scientists at Stanford Research Institute over a period of some 20 years looked systematically at the power of mind over matter, the ability of telecommunications around the world, the ability to work through walls and under the ocean to look at archaeological targets without the use of technology. This is revolutionary. This book goes along with all of the great books showing the skeptics their game is through. There is no such thing as private or secret information anymore. We've crossed a whole new barrier.
Right, and so this, of course, with Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher had a lot to do with quantum physics, the understanding of non-locality, and also entanglement. And that is what she feels is also behind a lot of the remote viewing, but she also actually took it to one other level, her and especially Russell Targ, and that is, she called it eighth space. And she felt that our mind already is operating in an eighth dimensional possibility. And that's why some people have precognition. And that means, you know, you can see things in advance. Now, you can't have it way, way in advance usually, because there's a lot of different avenues that those directions can take. But at least the next, you know, we'll say week and month. And they've done a lot of like really scientific experiments showing that we have that ability to predict the future, at least, you know, down the road a little ways. I also want to say No, what's also really important is that we do feel that the universe is full of life. I mean, right now, it was so cool to see the University of Nottingham come out and say that in our Milky Way galaxy alone, there has to be about 2 or 3 dozen other civilizations. Of course, they don't think they can get here. They're not willing to go that extra mile, but they at least feel that there's many different levels of intelligence. And I think all of us agree with that. In our personal experience, we feel there are so many levels of intelligence very similar to what we find on Earth, because some of them, the majority of people on Earth are really, wanting to help and wanting to assist and wanting to learn and wanting to grow. There's a few that aren't, that you would want to stay away from. And I think we all know who those are in a certain sense. But in actuality, and I also want to say something that Adam said one thing and then he said about his mother. I tend to be more like his mother, I think, because in actuality, those are beings, extraterrestrials, we consider are working with the 3rd and 4th dimension, 4th being time if we go with Einstein's equations, and then even 5th dimensional space, they can go into 5th dimensional and maybe even 8th dimensional, because we can too. But then there's other levels of intelligence that are even beyond that we consider up to the 24 dimensions and even outside of our known and local universe. And these are really those angelic powers. And all these are coming together now because we really think we are in a turning point going on. So Alan, when you say what are we going to do and what's the future going to be, it really is up to each one of us. And that's so important. And no one out there, hopefully the 5 or 10,000 or even 100,000 people watching this, should ever think that they don't have a potential to do something. We've done prayers for peace, and we've seen, areas like in the Middle East that were, wrapping up for war be neutralized. We've seen hurricanes going into certain areas, and we've sent out energy, not ourselves, but a collective group together. And we've seen that change. So everybody in the audience who's ever listening to this should realize we all have that potential, because it's part of this non-local field. And also almost anything we can think about, you like to think you're creative, your artists are drawing this and drawing that, but in actuality, a lot of what we think about exists in some reality, because we're tapping into that consciousness field.
So finding the divine spark within us is finding our destiny in space. Finding the larger roadmap that brings together part of the brain that is scientific and part which is spiritual. The two come together in a holy marriage. That was the vision of John the Divine. That was the vision of a momentary experience that I had as a multidimensional being, of having, as it were, my prayers answered, realizing we are part of a higher divine evolutionary process. We are a part of discovering that we are a part of a human family of unity, but also that extends to a divine family of unity.
What we call a cosmic family. So even here, we don't feel we completely evolved here. That's why you go out into space. I'm sure some of Adam's experiences and Grant's and even what Catherine and Martin has experienced, they look like us, so if they look like us, how do we get there? Is it all time travel? No, we believe really we existed in many star systems. It's one thing to talk about little green men or grays or whatever existing out there, but when you say we exist out there as well, that really shifts our whole history, and we start understanding the cosmic family.
So the portals of ascension are now being opened in all directions, and we must have the humility as well as the nakedness to realize that we are being given insights into what I consider to be the greater family that we are originally from. Spiritual beings in human form going back into a higher spiritual reality.
Great. No, thank you both for that addition. And Grant, doesn't this give you hope, this discussion here today, that things are possible? I mean, Adam's vision of the future on those 3 points include the new technologies you're talking about, portals and all the Zendras and all that. Yeah.
Okay, I think you got to balance that with the overall view that I've gotten, because I started with the Canadians back in the 1950s, what they were doing. And this comes to this 39% of all people on board the ship say they were shown the screen. I was just interviewing a guy this afternoon about the screen, and he was shown the massive fire. And then he said when he saw the Australian thing, he said it was exactly the same. And he said when he was in this vision, and it was beautiful, sort of like a farm and these cows. And he said the look of the cows in his eyes as this thing came, this big wall of flames came across the top of this hill and just burnt everything out. The cows looked at him, and he said the impression he got from the cows was, you are supposed to protect us. And so there's 39% of people who have these visions of the giant wave, of the nuclear destruction, of the flames or floods. And you get that whole thing that a lot of the messages that I see is they're telling us we're about to flush the toilet here. And so I'm always very reticent about technology, that we're going to get this technology and we're going to take it and then go and pollute and destroy other planets like we've done to our own. I mean, we have a very volatile situation. And in the Newtonian, Michael Newton's philosophy, where they regress 7,000 people in the spirit world, basically it really doesn't matter whether we make it or we don't make it. We're going to learn our lessons, that we have to learn from what we have. And if you take a look, in 1947, when we detonated the atomic bomb, that's when this whole thing really ramped up and came. So I think we can't forget that whole thing, that they are here in a large part to warn us of the situation we're in. And I can tell you from the Canadians, because I think Kathy was talking about this earlier, about these warnings. I know what the Canadians were told, because Wilbert Brockhouse-Smith, who ran the Canadian Flying Saucer program, told the story to Walt Andrus that AFA, the alien that he was dealing with, had told him, we are here and we need the nuclear weapons stopped. And if you take a look, when Adamski and Williamson had the first contact with the beings, it was about a week after the detonation of the hydrogen bomb. That's when they started to get the contacts. And Wilbert Smith said that AFA had told him, we will never step in and try to manipulate what's going on the world unless there's a nuclear exchange. If there's a nuclear exchange, we will step in and stop it. And we can prove that we could stop a nuclear exchange. We could take the moon in front of the entire world and split it in half and then put it back together again to prove that we could do it. But other than a nuclear exchange, we are going to allow the human race to stew in its own juices. And I think we have to keep in mind the fact that it's a very volatile situation. And I think the universe is neutral. It really doesn't matter whether we destroy ourselves, we don't destroy ourselves. It's all about learning lessons. It's about coming here. And so it comes down to, what are we to do in this whole thing, realizing that there's a lot of people are getting these very, very dire warnings on board the ship, that they're being told that we are in serious trouble. And then unless we turn it around and get this oneness, that we realize that we can't just continue to pollute the planet, kill each other, do all this separation stuff. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to this thing, that understanding that you are one with everything. And if you don't learn that lesson, then the universe is very neutral, and death is part of this universe. It's part of how the universe evolves.
Right. So, I mean, we may have this great vision that Adam has, but we have to really work, each one of us to make it happen. I mean, that's sort of the message you're getting, Kathleen, right? About the nuclear weapons and cleaning up our mess here.
Yes, that's true. And Grant was talking about Wilbert Smith. Well, I was very interested in Wilbert Smith's relationship with Admiral Herbert Knowles, who lived in southern Maine near Frances Swan, who was the woman who was communicating telepathically with these non-humans. And so the message that Wilbert Smith was giving, is very interesting. I was able to acquire some letters from Admiral Knowles' granddaughter, and they were letters between Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith about the scientific study that they were working on to attempt to determine whether or not these communications were in fact real. And Wilbert Smith was able to determine that, because these individuals, AFA and Panar, said that they were here in very large numbers and did want to be stewards to the earth. They wanted to help us. They were willing to give us technology even, but they said that they would not favor one nation over another. And as Grant said, they were very, very concerned about our use of nuclear weapons. And they are concerned that we will get to the point, as I said earlier, that we could destroy this planet. And they said that then that they would step in. And they've been saying that since 1954 that I'm aware of. That was part of the message that Kevin Briggs, whom I spoke about earlier, the non-human entities that he's communicating with, who claim to be a group of extraterrestrials, two grays, an insectoid, let me think, a tall white, and a blue avian. Part of this group are giving the same message. And Kevin had no idea what Francis Swan had communicated back in 1954. But it is the same kind of message that they will attempt to step in if we are about to destroy this planet. They are very concerned.
Wow. No, that seems to be the situation we're in now. I mean,
can I add one thing, Alan?
Yeah, please.
I had a conversation with Wilbert Smith's wife, just as she retired from the Canadian government. She was Secretary to the Speaker of the Senate. She talked about the technology where Wilbert was working on a gravity control experiment. And he'd been working on it for quite a while, and he'd gotten warnings from the beings. One time it exploded. They were getting these, AFO was basically telling them how to work this gravity control experiment. And he went to the National Research Council at the very end, just before he died, and said he had this, and they said, well, write it down. He said, I'm not going to write it down because you're going to come in the house and take it like you've done. He had all sorts of inventions that they had basically said, you're working for the government, and they control the patents. And so he said, I won't write it down. They said, no, we're not going to look at it unless you write it down. His wife said he came home with this gravity control experiment they'd worked on for years. There was a group of 6 people working on it. And she said, he took it apart and he said to me, it's probably better this way anyway. They're probably just going to build bombs with it. And she said he never spoke about it again. And he died shortly after that.
Wow. Well, so I think, we're in a difficult situation. We have this amazing potential future, and yet we have the greed, the corporate structures, the industrial complex that doesn't want to make it happen. Adam, you laid out, I want to just focus on the positive, but unfortunately we have this other part of ourselves really that we have yet to deal with. So each one of us has to stand up and take action, but what do you say? What's your solution to this real divide? This is a real critical time we're in.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say I agree with Grant that there's very real danger and a risk that we're facing right now. And I also agree with him that, the universe can lose planets and lose star systems, and it happens all the time. And there is a larger game going on in terms of souls and existence, and life comes and goes, and death is a deep part of the universe. And so I'm very with him on those statements and agree there. And I'm with Kathleen in the sense that that there is also a very, very real sense of care that I've experienced with my galactic family as I've gotten to know them and work with them more. And that care is much like adults that have kids that are teenage year, and they're looking at, humanity as, in the flailing years of our teenage time when we're, wrecking cars and partying too hard and, almost killing ourselves all the time. And you can't stop people from making mistakes, but you can do your best to encourage them and point them in the right direction. And in my experience, this really all comes down to the fact that we are them and they are us, as Kathleen very clearly said before. And I personally know that I came to this planet during the age of Atlantis from the Sirian star system. And I've been Pleiadian before that, and I was Shehaley before that, and I was Andromedan before I came to this galaxy. And I've done that work in tracing that so that I could better know the ways of those beings and the style, the creation, the experience of these species on other worlds, and get to know them from my own personal self. And something very different happens when you start to realize that maybe you've been on this planet for a long time, but maybe you came from somewhere else, and that maybe a lot of these galactic beings coming through and connecting, and especially whatever species you may have deep personal contact with, may be your family, like actually beings that you incarnated with before and spent time with before. And this changes it all, because all of a sudden this word alien just becomes horrible, and even extraterrestrial feels kind of weird, because it's you are all extraterrestrial, you know, and like most of us have had experience on other worlds. And so now it's actually about reunion, and it's about getting back in tune and in touch and in sync with our family that's out there. And I see just even the act of ships shutting down nuclear testing is a sign that there is an active work of care to help us protect us from destroying ourselves in this really critical transitionary phase. Now there also has to be, of course, limits to that because, you know, again, Gene Roddenberry comes in with, you know, the kind of protocols of planetary relationship. And there is an essential need as a species that's highly advanced to not interfere too much with the evolutionary growth arc of a species, because we've tried that in the past. And what happens is the species on the planet that's not fully matured yet believes that the other species are gods or angels. And it's happened countless times on Earth when Earth wasn't quite ready. And we have to go through the initiation ourselves and mature ourselves. And when I talk about these technologies, I'm not speaking of them as soon as we have this tech, all of our problems are solved. No, but the condition of being able to generate these kinds of technologies is deeply intertwined with our own capacity for spiritual development in ourselves. In a way, we're kind of constrained to actually externalize that technology which we have already developed within and have built capacity within. And there's a phasing and staging process to this. So the work to be done is internal. It is about developing love. It's about developing community. It's about learning how to see every person of every race as your family, as your brothers and sisters, because we need to see every being from every star system that way, you know, and we need to see all life as part of our part of our family here on this planet. And these are stages not only of acceptance, but of taking responsibility. And that means like being willing to be guardians for this earth, guardians for the future of life. And then we start actually extending the inner gifts that we have to philosophies and protocols and cultural methodologies that actually pave the way for this planetary transition to occur at scale.
Beautiful.
Can I ask a question of Adam?
Yeah, you have a question for Adam?
Yeah, my reservation about this is you and I and a bunch of people on this broadcast are very enlightened. How do we prevent the military-industrial complex with $735 billion budget from controlling the technology? Because you and I don't have the ability to develop this technology. You're going to need money. How do we keep it away from the people who now control the oil industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and everything else?
That's a really tough question. I mean, the reality is there is a level of control that's been developed through our current economic system that is a great hurdle to overcome. And I will say the word cabal, for example, you know, and military industrial complex, as Eisenhower said, and reference these things with very great concern. And certain things are changing. There is a level of abundance and being created on this planet for people that never had it before because of cryptocurrencies, for example. I have, you know, a few close friends that just happened to play video games that exchanged Bitcoin, you know, 20 years ago, and now, you know, or 10 years ago really was like the big juncture, but but then now they're billionaires, you know, and there's a stewardship occurring that I see in the youth, that I encountered through the Nexus summits at the United Nations, and my work with next generation leaders at the White House. Like, these kids come from some of the wealthiest families in the world, but they were like, I'm not going to take over this empire. Like, I'm going to go travel internationally. I'm going to get to know the people on this earth, and I'm going to figure out what I can do to make a difference my way. How can I be in greatest service with this money that's coming to me to help humanity and to help life? And I will say, I know of quite a few very secret projects that are working on a lot of these technological challenges and problems. Some are more public than others too, you know, but there are some that are very much under wraps, and I won't mention locations or names or anything ever, because I believe that we need to have these things phase in, and some of the kind of allowance pattern that's occurring through allowing Luis Elizondo and these guys to actually start publicly doing this sort of framing that, yes, we're going to build, you know, faster than light tech, and yes, we're going to transition to these things, and yes, we know UFOs are real, and we're going to call them unidentified aerial phenomena. I mean, even the term phenomena is a problem in some ways, because when people get wrapped up in the phenomenology of seeing a ship do a check mark in the sky, but they don't take any steps beyond that to actually connect and make contact, then nothing happens, right? No real change happens for them. And yet, when we are willing to go beyond the phenomena, and as you have, you know, really hit the nail on the head, Grant, go beyond just the technology to the process of transformation and change that's going on inside, the picture starts to look really different. Because even COVID and the fires and everything that's happening right now, if you step back and you look at it from like Gaia's perspective, like a planetary change perspective, you know, fire is the ultimate cleansing. Fire is rebirth, and breath is the prana, right? And so we have to shift how we breathe, shift how we deal with the reality that sometimes we're going to be in places where it's difficult to breathe. Mm-hmm. And how do we work with that? How do we work with the own shadow? If somebody out there, if you smoke, you know, for example, you're putting smoke in your lungs all the time, but can you still open up your lungs and open up your breath and open up your heart? If you're caught in addiction, can you still go through the transmutation process of moving through that experience that you're in towards a greater state of enlightenment? And that's across the board for any wound, any challenge, any trauma. We have to be willing to face it and really go for it, go deeply into it, and accept those places that are hardest to look at, so that we can accept ourselves and each other.
Right, we are coming to a critical point. They say with addiction, you have to hit bottom, and only from there can you start to awaken. And I don't think we've hit bottom. We're close to that, the human race, and the destruction and the greed and the wars. I mean, I don't, do we really need more wars, more guns, more bombs? It's so, I'm going to ask this question from the chat here. Wouldn't it put an end to all the power struggles and government manipulation if mass disclosure took place on a level where everyone who needs proof could no longer deny the truth? Like, here we are, bam. Or am I naive and oversimplifying that? JJ and Desiree, you want to take that question?
A very good question. I think that was the decision made by the Joint Chiefs and others back in the 50s. Too much knowledge would upset the economic and social balance necessary for a prosperous American experiment of life. In retrospect, we know that freedom is the answer to the quandary that we're in. And Desiree and I have both experiences of being briefly into the future and being brought back. So we know that we have cosmic family, cosmic counterparts. They can change the mindset dramatically within seconds. And so even though the earth may go down, the Merkaba, or the vehicle of light, and the consciousness of light can go up at the same time. You don't have to one to the exclusion of the other. So it's the ability to use our critical decisions, our good selective factor, to go with the winning team that has gone through the quagmire of earth-based technology. And that winning team from the Pleiades, from what we believe are the brotherhoods and sisterhoods, from the other realms of Orion and beyond are at our doorstep to tell us whether we take a spiritual consciousness leap or future science leap into the future. The future is here. We must wake up, go beyond the negativity, smell the coffee, and rejoice in the fact that the divine spark of the cosmic Christ is at our doorstep.
Right. So I'm not naive that there isn't a military industrial complex, but Dr. Hurtak, in his experience in the 70s that brought the Keys of Enoch, was told that actually 64 areas of science was going to be given to this planet so that we can actually take a quantum leap, and we'll be prepared for that, we'll say, our cosmic culture connection.
And that was shown where lost civilizations would be found even under the ocean, to remind us that we have the Atlantis scenario that will repeat itself every so many thousands of years. Planet Earth is a schoolhouse for learning. We have bad teachers, we have bad governments, but at the same time, we have a spiritual frontier within the consciousness makeup of our inner psyche. And this is the importance. Grant's experience, his transformation a few years ago, that of Russell Tarr going to the spiritual dynamics of non-locality, shows us we're in for a great leap forward. So let us put the emphasis on the positive sparks of the divine within us.
And we have to, of course, do it ourselves, but ultimately, you know, who's going to help? Basically, these other beings, and extraterrestrial and what we call ultra-terrestrial, are helping. They are trying to guide and direct. Mentally, we started with the idea of consciousness. Well, you know, they're also, we were actually with the indigenous people in Brazil, the Xavante, and they're in your heads all the time. That's just how they communicate. And other levels of intelligence can actually do that
They
too.
say the sky people or the star people are coming back. They know the cries of Mother Earth, even though we don't pray or cry. I think it's rather ridiculous. They do, and they understand the cries of the animals, the cries of the forest. The realities of Mother Earth is attracting other levels of cosmic intelligence that is part of the solution. We are having to make the solution work by taking the higher path.
Right, so we are the solution in that sense by bringing forth the technology that Adam had talked about and many other technologies, but using the right selective factor like AI intelligence or cloning, it can go either way. So it's really up to us, and especially the younger generation, as Adam mentioned, that can make that right selective factor. But we are being aided, we are being watched, we are being protected on many levels from these other levels of intelligence that are here who and want to help us and are guiding us and have observed us for thousands of years, and especially since the Trinity site, 1945.
So wake up, humanity, understand the cosmic others, understand your destiny in space. No longer take vital time to doubt the issues. Realize the plethora of new discovery, scientific work that will set you free to understand the gift of the divine within you. The partnership of the human and the transhuman, the partnership of the human evolution, the higher evolution, is on our doorstep. Consciousness is the missing key we must now use.
And we really are cosmic cousins to these other levels of intelligence. And we are also, ultimately, we feel multidimensional beings. We would even say in some cases originally light beings, light energy, manifesting here temporarily. We haven't done a good job of being caretakers of Mother Earth, but we certainly can try to work with it now.
As I show the sphere of light that appeared within the military complex, and out of the sphere of light a being appeared, stepped out of a sphere of light. This is something far beyond science fiction. The fact that
Can you
light,
show that again, JJ? Can we see that picture again? What are you showing us here?
It's a sphere of light that entered a military complex, actually.
keep it
Okay.
confidential.
And it scared the people there, actually.
We
They
were
all
part
saw
of the experiment of using mantras or sacred language to acclimate scientists and leaders to realize that we are being listened to at all times. Our decisions must move away from nuclear destruction, move away from the inhumanity we have towards all life, realizing, of course, that we have in the schoolhouse of Mother Earth the decision and the freedom to do so. We must take the higher path to understand that we are part of the divine evolution in human form.
But it all does come down to choice, and it's really up to each one of us working together collectively.
No, thank you. Thank you. I do believe we are being protected from destroying our planet, but we do have to help ourselves too out of the mess we created. I mean, it's interesting. We started talking about ETs and UFOs, and then we're talking about our own struggle with each other. I mean, this is really what it comes down to. We don't have to fear ETs. It's our fellow human beings that are the problems here.
But the global media, the global commons that you, Alan, and others like you are creating throughout the world, influencing millions and millions of young people. That's the solution. The critical mass is already in motion. For those who wish to go with the light, they will be given that situation. To those who want to go backwards 5,000 years into darkness, into the cave, that solution is there too. The two do not exclude one another because there are other factors that have now entered into the play of civilization.
Right. I mean, Kathleen, you've been dealing with this idea of the need to do away with nuclear weapons. You said earlier what that did, the nuclear bombs fractured this time-space continuum, which doesn't only affect us, but affects other dimensions as well. And, you know, as we learn to be multidimensional beings, we need multidimensional hygiene, don't we? To take care of ourselves.
Yes.
Talk about what you think the answer to this real gridlock. I think there is a slow melting in government to let go of the secret, like this person said online. Why don't we just come out with it and see how it all lands? Give us the truth and set us free. But, you know, it's a struggle. Yeah.
And true. And somebody asked, why don't craft just come in large numbers and land and hover over cities? And the answers that I've received for that kind of question is that it would be interpreted as an invasion.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be military action against that sort of thing, and perhaps around the world. And it could end up very, very bad for humans.
Mm-hmm.
This has to be planned very, very carefully. And it has to happen at just the right time. People have to be prepared for it. And heads of state and military forces have to be prepared for this sort of thing too. It's not something that would bode well for our society if they suddenly landed and tried to communicate with everyone, with heads of state. We're here and we're going to help you. If you just look at what has happened on this planet, when technologically advanced societies went into indigenous societies and the breakdown of the society that occurs and societies losing their culture.
Right.
There's a possibility that that could happen here if it happened too quickly.
That's what Richard Hastings says. Yeah, they're coming and going, get us familiar with the idea there's something out there. And then when it's like, as Adam says, self-evident, boom, we don't need to panic.
That's why they've been feeding us information for the last 45, 50, even 75 years.
And that's why experiencers are coming forth and sharing that. Did you have anything else to say, Kathleen? Because we should start to finish up.
No, that's fine.
Well, you have a lot to say, but we'll do one more wrap up. But
Okay.
thank you. Grant, you've been studying governments and the thinking of governments for a long time. What do you think the long-range plan or the short-range plan, what is the future of not just disclosure, confirmation? Eric Davis said we have crashed vehicles. I mean, how do you think they are thinking about this?
I think the warning that I would give is the government, people always talk about the government as if it's one unit. So that what's happened here is you've gotten people inside the government who wanted this out, who wanted the technology. So like Lou Elizondo and the guy from Lockheed Skunk Works and stuff like that. And they've come out. What I'm afraid of is that the government is very easily manipulated in terms of, because they have no idea what's going on. They have no clue. They're busy trying to raise money for the next election campaign or whatever. So I'll give you the example about to the stars with this situation where before this happened, before this latest version of a threat came out, if you go back to Leslie Kane's book, and she was working with John Podesta and the Obama administration, in her book, if you take a look at what they put in the book, was a threat to airline traffic. That was the thing back in the Obama days. And I guess everybody just laughed and said, forget it, we don't need this. And so when you go to Congress, and you want money for research purposes, and I believe they just want research because they think they can crack the technology and control the technology and this kind of stuff. They're doing it for honest purposes. How do you do it? So you go to Congress and you have to have a threat. If you don't have a threat, nobody's going to listen to you. Why would they even listen to you? So you're going to get money. I remember Melinda Leslie told me this, that she had this conversation with Jim Semivan, who's one of the two top guys at To the Stars. And he had said on 4 occasions, he said, there is no threat. And yet, when they go in front of the Appropriations and the Intelligence Committee, they're saying that this is a threat. So Melinda said to Jim, she said, Jim, what is there that I could say to you that would get you so upset with me that you'd never talk to me again? And he said, mess with the money. And this is the whole deal. It comes down to the money. So it comes down to so somebody mentions disclosure. It depends who's putting out the disclosure message. What's the disclosure message going to be? Is it going to be evil aliens are here and we need to double the defense budget? Or is it going to be the oneness message? I don't think there's anybody in the government who knows the oneness message, the spiritual message that you and I have. So therefore, it comes down to my thing is I'm going to do what I have to do. You have to do what you got to do. And if you have the message, as the Bible says, what profit of a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? You and I have to do what we have to do. We came into the earth to do something, and the onus is on us to put out the message and not worry about what happens. We can only do what we can do. We can't really spend our time worrying about what the government's going to do or what's going to happen here. We only say, why did I come on earth? What is my role here, and am I doing it? Because it's up to us to get the message. I guarantee you the government has no concept about oneness, about spirituality. They are us, we are them. They have no concept. They're just sitting there listening, and whoever spins the narrative is the one that gets the money.
Right, you're absolutely right. I think it's up to each one of us. And that's why Neil's put this conference together. We've had thousands of people around the world to inform them and to take action. So I'll ask one last question to Adam Apollo from a viewer. C. Albert says, are we about to have an Atlantis magnitude reset?
Yeah, that's certainly a very deep one. The way that I look at planetary evolution after studying Earth and our past and the many cataclysms that have happened and the cultural kind of shifts and things that have happened during each of those, as well as looking at other star nations and asking them about different periods in their planet where they had the similar kind of instability. One of the kind of clearest ways to interpret this that I've come to understand is that planets have energetic bodies just like we do. And planets go through a series of sort of reformations in their energetic body as that body evolves. Teilhard de Chardin called it like we're in the stage of opening the noosphere. And this speaks very clearly to the sort of level of planetary evolution that may be occurring at this time. If we look back at the age of Atlantis, one of the major sort of mythologies that we get a lot is there's this interconnected global civilization, and there's this building of the Tower of Babel, so to speak, right? As humanity goes forth to reach the gods. Well, if we reinterpret that a little bit, we can say, oh, okay, it was a time where there's lots of star family coming to Earth and a lot of human hybrid beings of different races, etc., trying to reach up and meet that star family coming down and develop communion so that we could become part of this galactic community. And that's exactly what happened for me, and why I came here was to try to reestablish that contact. But Earth herself wasn't really ready for that transition yet. And planets have to go through initiation processes too. And so the actions of life on Earth at that time and the energetic shifts going on Earth at that time sort of all aligned to create this pressure that would cause earthquakes and volcanoes are in the polar regions, massive waves, and you have this massive flood that occurs, right? And the end or the fall of the Tower of Babel, not this like wrathful God approach, but one that is actually an initiatory phase for humanity, and one that sort of spreads out all of these new star beings who just showed up on Earth are all now here and incarnated here and now spread all over the planet, incarnating in different races and cultures. And they have to learn how to get to know Earth. And so their inherent language begins to develop. And what you start to see is this massive flood and this breaking of the Tower of Babel as this real opening of the throat chakra of Gaia and the birthing of many, many, many different kinds of languages and different kinds of communications between people through this isolation that occurs from the cataclysm. Now, I look at the phase of transition that we're going through now, very much like Teilhard de Chardin, in that we are now opening up the noosphere, or the third eye of the Earth. And in this phase, there's huge transformations when your third eye pops open. Things can be pretty painful in your head when the pineal really, cracks off any calcification. You start processing lots of information. You may start seeing ghosts and spirits, and there's kind of a shocking transition to that. And so many of the phenomena that occur as we begin operating at this level that, as JJ and Desiree said, is kind of beyond the five senses and operating from this level of awareness. It's a huge stretch and it's a huge shift. But when you look at Gaia as a planet entering that shift, it's much more subtle. It doesn't require like massive smacking, cracking, coughing open to blow open the third eye. It's a much more subtle transition that may have pressure and evolutionary change that goes on, fire and water, alchemy, things like this that are moving us into this space. But every layer of the teaching for us right now is actually to start seeing the whole of the Earth. Not how do we just talk to one race or another, but how do we see the whole? How do we see ourselves as a whole planet? And then relate as a whole planet with a whole galaxy. And these are all activities that require the balance of yin and yang, the balance of light and shadow, the infinite nines, that make up the 18 of the third eye chakra, and actually truly accepting the pain and the trauma of the past, as I've said before, but also the curses of the past. Because if we look at the third eye's geometry, this 18 petal structure that is the infinite yin and the infinite yang, the two petals of the yang and the yin, 18 also happens to break down to 3 6s. Isn't that interesting? Because our sacral chakra is 6, our heart chakra is 12, and the natural harmonic progression is 6 6 6, which is 18. And yet we've had this idea, implanted through the curses of Christianity as they were rolling across Europe and trying to take out the tribal cultures. They were trying to stop their magic. They were trying to make the pentagram evil, which was the symbol of communion with the earth and connection with the elements, and make 666 evil, which is this geometry of the third eye chakra. And so, yes, and there have been stories told and ideas laid into the kind of framework of our human perception collectively that we actually have to come into questioning now and crack through those lies, crack through the things that have kept us from actually accepting and being in trust and overcoming fear and coming to love each other. No matter what our cultural background is, no matter what our religion is, whether you're Wiccan or you're Buddhist or you're Christian or you're like you name it, Islam, it doesn't matter. Every background and every belief has threads of truth. And for us to accept each other, we have to start really accepting all the parts of each other and cracking through the false stories.
Beautiful. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. JJ and Desiree, give us some final words, but give us how to contact you and all the events that you're doing, but also give us what your conclusion, how do we move forward into this new time, this new reality? Go ahead. Wait, you have to unmute.
Carrying on what Adam just said, mathematically, 666 can be turned into 999. That's the keys of Enoch. So with the new consciousness, there's also a language of light. And the language of light is to see life as a life in technicolor, see life in music, see life in sacred geometry. And you put this together, this is the language of Ascension. And Alice Coltrane has worked with me and I with her many years ago, and this new album is going to be released It's part of a global tone we believe will sweep around the hearts and minds of young people, raising consciousness from the 7 chakras into the next 7, which means as you go into the mathematics of the ancients, there is a divine science behind scripture that's been forgotten. That divine science is that of the higher love and the higher light that come together in the divine marriage that John the Divine sees. Without that, everything can be chaos, false competition, or the unholy trinity of competition, acquisition, and consumption. No, that trinity of unconditional love, greater light, greater consciousness is before us, and that's what the Academy for Future Science is all about, science guided by consciousness.
And the Keys of Enoch talk about a space-time overlap that we're going through, and that's connecting us with higher levels of reality. It's awakening our consciousness. It's giving us more synchronicities. I think most people feel that in their lives, because for the most part, the planet can be dissynchronous. But the more you work with the higher forces of light we've been talking about tonight, and even greater forces, as I mentioned in the multidimensional realities, then you're getting into that higher synchronicity. And really your life, like Grant has experienced, goes with the flow. And so this is what we all have to be prepared for. We believe in a certain sense it's the day of graduation. You want to know more about us, you can find us at keysofenoch.org. And Dr. Hurtak, in addition to the Keys of Enoch that came out in the 70s, is starting to complete the last 10 that he talked about. And we're up to, at the end of this year, it'll be the end of 405, or 5 keys.
Which is the Divine Family.
Which is on the Divine Family that we're beginning to recognize. And our family is here. Adam, I feel you're part of our extended family, and all of you, and Kathleen and Grant, also we're all on the same wavelength. But there's also our cosmic family that we also connect
So
with.
be the light and step out of the shadow. Be the future that you came to be. Be the Christ self that you came to radiate, and forget about the mythology, because we've gone way beyond that, as Russell Tark has shown in so many of his wonderful papers in the new film, Third Eye Spies. Be the real third eye and bring humanity into oneness.
And we're more than not alone in the universe. We're actually part of a cosmic unity of spirit, as we've all said. And so feel that spirit. Everyone has to be able to feel and interconnect with this higher cosmic consciousness field that we're part of.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. We might do a little prayer at the end. Kathleen, do you want to talk about from your position as a lifelong researcher, where are we going, and what do you think we can do as individuals and collectively?
That's a very good question and difficult to answer, but I'm not sure where we're going. I hope we're moving forward in a positive direction. And it is dependent upon all of us and what we do to move ourselves and our planet ahead. And I'm optimistic. I think that we can do this if we all work together, and to raise human consciousness and to move ourselves into a position where we will be able to communicate directly with our non-human visitors and those who look very much like us as well.
We can do this. I know we can. Yes.
And my website is Kathleen Marden, MARDEN.com.
Thank you for being here today. Grant, what are you up to? Where are we going, and how do we get there?
I think the Hurtaks and Kathy summed it all up. I would just add, I'm always heavily influenced by 4 events, and one was seeing Dr. Michael Newton lecture, Journey of Souls. And whether it's right or wrong, I believe that when you leave the earth, you go in front of the council for the life review, and you only get asked one question: how to work out. Because you planned it, I put it all together. And it's the old expression, too much is given, much is expected. Or Edgar Cayce said, knowledge not used is sin. So you have to empathize with the people out there in the world who haven't got a clue what's going on. You and I know what's going on. Much is expected of us. And I'd hate to be there at the end and say, well, I was thinking of doing that, but I thought, well, I'll put it off for another week. And so that's all you have to do is put it out there. And when you see the synchronicities that happen in life, you realize that there are people that are helping you. The universe is helping you. And all you can do is what you can do, but do it.
Thanks. And what's coming up for you? What's a book coming out for you?
Well, I have the book Portals and UFOs at Mount Shasta, which just came out, which I get into the portal thing, and I'm just waiting for and actually a briefing in the next day or two, whether I'm right on this whole philosophy. I think that there's some understanding of portals, and I'm working on this book on psychedelics, because we talked about near-death experiences and abduction experiences, and you'll find the same thing in psychedelics. Sting, the famous musician, where he goes and does ayahuasca. And he said, I suddenly realized everything was alive and conscious. And I looked at this little plant coming out of the crack and I said, oh, that's my brother. So you see these same parallels in all these different things. So I'm working on a book on psychedelics. And then I'm doing a book called Extraterrestrial or Maybe Not, where I actually look at what To the Stars calls the others. Mm-hmm. Who are we actually dealing with? Are these beings? Are they part of ourselves or this sort of thing? And if you want to contact me, I guess the best place, I put most of my stuff on White House UFO Facebook site.
Right. Thanks for that. I think once we're really alive, we don't even need psychedelics, because like once we're awakened beings, everything becomes alive. That's just my opinion. All right, Adam, what about you? What's your final conclusion? Not final, but at this moment, what do you think?
Oh, well, I just say, like, if you feel it in your heart and you feel called, go meet your star family, reach out, open up, start practicing. A great way to start opening up telepathy is to connect with a really deep loved one who passes away, because just learning how to commune with other beings in the spirit world is a great start, because you can get a lot of really strong confirmations and they'll show you things. And extending that to our star family, I think, is really valuable, because we have a lot to learn from the family out there at this time. I'll share a link in the chat for a site that I've used to document some of the most human-like species that are here, and that a lot have shared a lot of their souls to this planet. And so there's many, many beings here who have incarnated from these species. And it's just good to get to know these beings. And the last thing that I'll say is that right now is a time when we need more discernment than ever, right? Because in the process of waking up, we both open ourselves up and we start getting all kinds of new information. We start realizing that there's a lot of false stuff out there, and we start looking for new sources of truth. But there's also a lot of lines laid with bait that have been laid in front of people waking up right now that lead down pipelines that are actually a little twisted and that have a lot of agenda and a lot of manipulation baked into them. So I just really encourage people to use their hearts, use discernment. How does something actually make you feel? Does it create trigger reactions and fear? Does it open your heart deeper and help you actually feel, wow, okay, that feels like alignment with everything that I am and all that I've ever been. Truth is self-evident, as you guys have heard me say many times. And I believe that we need to tune into that truth thermometer in ourselves now more than ever. And we need to really develop that muscle. So good luck out there in navigating the massive mess of information that's currently propagating the noosphere, and find your own tuning line to truth. Find that line that you can tap into that has a connection to your whole self and who you are, and you will be able to find your way to freedom and love.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam Apollo. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I have a book coming out next year from St. Martin's Press called Making Contact, which is a collection of essays by myself, the Hurtaks, Grant Cameron, Linda Moulton Howe, Whitley Strieber, all the real top thinkers in the field, and hopefully have a series of that. So look for that. But I also want to say that I think the future looks good, because what we have here at Portal to Ascension, what everyone's watching, thousands of people this week, is a collective field. So before we close, why don't we just take 30 seconds and just beam out from our hearts this essence of love to the world. And this is how we make a change. Our field can affect consciousness. So let's just take 30 seconds and we'll do this. Beam out love. JJ, can you end with a benediction? Oh, unmute yourself, JJ.
There are many words for divine glory, one of which is the Shekinah. May the Shekinah glory of light be placed around Mother Earth. May the doves of light be over our hearts. May the energies of divine love pour forth from our hearts to all humanity. And may we be shepherds of glory as we guide and help the human race enter into the greatest chapter of history in joining the family of nations. The people of the stars, the people of light, who help us discover that we are also brothers and sisters of the light. May peace prevail on earth and in the heavens, as we say joyously the four great amens for the four corners of the earth. Amen, 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 and amen.
This is a portal to Ascension we just opened here tonight. Thank you everyone watching on YouTube, Facebook, the chat, Zoom. Thank you Neil and Michelle and everyone who's contributed to this amazing day of disclosure. We started with Disclosure Fest, Adrian, and just went right through covering all the aspects of how we're going to wake up as a planetary civilization to our cosmic heritage. So anything you have to say, Michelle or Neil, about a conclusion for the day?
I would like to just extend my deepest gratitude to each one of you for bringing this forward. And I had typed in the private chat with the list with the hosts that I feel like Contact in the Desert didn't this year. Of you are speakers at Contact in the Desert, but what happened here in these days, especially, I really felt that today as well. Contact in our homes, and it went far and wide. My whole body is alight with the knowing that we made history today. Make history. And Neil, you did that for us. So my gratitude is so deep and so profound for each one of you for adding your light, adding your wisdom and your love. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Neil. Beautiful day. And you, any words, final words, or?
To be quite honest, I'm pretty much speechless. Everything went so well, and I couldn't have planned it better myself. It went so good. Everything came together so great. Everybody was on point, on time. It was just the synergy and the collaboration. There was virtually, I've been sleeping 10 hours a night and having really good rest every single night, So it's just working out so great. And I'm just so happy to be sharing this with you. This day was really just picking up so much momentum. The energy of the day and the experiences, the amount of information that we put out into the cosmos today is intense, So I'm just excited for that. We're going to continue tomorrow, and tomorrow we have a lot of information again, but we also have the experience, So tomorrow it's about the integration of all of this information, and I'm really thinking that I want to create a post-conference sometime, so we're going to keep it going somehow.
Well, it really was about love, and the love you put into this, and Michelle and everyone here. It's what the sort of undercurrent of this theme, which I didn't expect. We're talking about disclosure, and then Grant brings in love, and of course, it's all about that. It's all about sharing who we are as our essence, and who needs ETs when we can do that? No, I'm kidding.
No, you guys are rock stars. Neil, you are awesome, bro. Thank you so much for creating this. And Alan, you're always fun to thank you. You're an amazing panel host. And Michelle, I had so much fun with you yesterday. Just thank you guys so much.
Yeah. And Kathleen, thanks for your years of dedication. And Grant, you are at it day and night. I don't know how you do. And of course, JJ and Desiree are tireless. They do not take a vacation. They do not rest. Right now, there are about 50 people in their living room watching along with them. And
superheroes.
And people around the world. So you're just always at it, and thank you for your fantastic contribution and dedication.
And one of those people is Brad Olson. You're going to be on tomorrow, right?
Yeah, Brad's
he's
there.
going to be on tomorrow.
Oh, hey, Brad.
Brad.
Brad, come over for
Yeah,
a
yeah,
second.
yeah. He's just one of the people. in
And
the
Brad is
room.
here with his great insights.
Hey.
Oh my gosh. Hi,
Hey,
Brad.
You guys all rock.
Brad, want to say anything about tomorrow?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Brendan,
Yeah, you know he's
it's
tall,
not my
right?
show. I'll be talking with you guys tomorrow. I have some new information about Antarctica I think is going to be really exciting to share. As many of you know, I was down there earlier last year. I was with Mr. Apollo in Peru and Bolivia. We got to know each other quite well, and so many wonderful things are happening. Some of the greatest mysteries of the world are now being revealed. And here we are all sharing it together. So great job, you guys, tonight. Really, really enjoyed it. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, homie. Good to see you.
Do you want to do a closing wrap, Neil, or are we?
Yeah.
Neil, let's let Neil thank all the behind the scenes, Omar and Tanya and
Oh, right.
Sol,
Yes.
tireless efforts behind the scenes in the chat, making Zoom got back on and making it this event. Thank you to all the people who are helping behind the scenes, and to all of you, the listeners and the viewers that were really engaging in the chats and asking profound questions that had such uplifting answers from all of you tonight. Thank you.
Sharia, too, has been there constantly for the past 4 days. So many people. This is a team effort.
Energy's been so high.
Sharia has been love personified this whole event.
Seriously.
Yes.
The communication between all of us has been so seamless, and just going back and forth to make sure everything runs. It's just been so great, and I'm just so happy and blessed to have everybody be a part of it.
So do you want to end? Because I like to showcase
Yeah,
your
let's do
work. Because Neil is he's a visionary, but he's a poet, and it's very contemporary, and it kind of puts the whole spiritual drive that we're facing into words. So
yeah, I figured I'd play a video of us traveling through space while I do it.
Okay, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Nice.
Let's do it. All right.
This is good.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna do 3 poems back to back. It'll probably go 5 minutes. So the whole video.
I just want to say, see us here. We'll see everyone here at 10:30 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Yeah. So everybody, please also share it. Let everybody else know. We want to really get as many people tomorrow for the grand finale. I'm gonna send out another email. So just keep the energy high all the way till the end. So love you all. See you later. Can you turn off the fan, baby? It's just another day. Sun cast away, hiding in space. New moon appears to black the sky fades. Pluto in retrograde. Saturn's rings, I feel gravitationally pulling as Jupiter is the king, protecting Earth's inhabitants from the asteroid that sings. A chapter of a story. Another one closes. A new species arose with self-awareness, genetically changed, mutated neural networks within the brain to construct limitation of mind, to move away from the God inside, consumed with temptation and bribe, fed greed and lies from the elite who thrive on contractual linear time, blocking subconscious signs that we are all one. Crop circles of sacred geometrically run, universal abundance, moving away from the worship of the sun, leading nations with bomb and guns. We were all victims to our own creation, to the evolution of the mason. So I'm pacing back and forth, lighting up sage on my porch, looking at the skies, contemplating why I chose to come down this time, contemplating when it will be time for all humanity to thrive. As an Arcturian warrior of light, I gave up trying to fight. Now I embrace the upcoming arrival, the evolution of our godly race. No more denial. And then there was one. Life untangled, rhymers undone, life source drained, vanity explained, following those with fame, always fight and complain, answer remains the same, control with borders and tamed, locked up and enslaved, riding the quantum wave, through awareness we are saved. Ascend and fade away, live for today and don't play games or get erased from this place. One face, unity of race, consciousness explained, end of human reigns, galactic alliance remains, a true cosmic place amongst the stars in space. Aware now in case reincarnation takes my next life away. So ascend and pray, not for monetary gains, but an escape for superficial ways. Life is just a phase that will one day be replaced by pure energy and an entirely new intergalactic race. So I live life to the fullest, Each day, seconds turn into minutes. Time passes by. Animals and leaves die, browning by the seasons. Growing and planting seeds again is what all men and women are destined to do in order to continue to live the life that we choose. The sun shines light as we move through heaven's tunnels and tubes, wormholes, niches, and grooves, navigating existence so we can enter the womb in gestation. I am elation, exhilaration, and patience. Creates the balance in this wasteland of nuclear pollution. My observation of creation is that we're all heading for the same destination. Millennia of intergalactic wars can't stop the frequency that we're all in store for, so I spit from the core of my lost fragmented soul, reclaiming pieces I left in this world. The carrot in front of me, the elusive pearl. I remember. I came here before. Just one MC, energetically emanating empathy, connected to the fire within me, where it became pure energy. The allergy towards this world of anarchy, amnesia, and this fallacy, anesthesia, numb out the insanity, overstimulation leading to apathy. Speak out against the status quo, accusations of blasphemy. The gravity of third-dimensional reality eventually causes atrophy, physical and emotional bankruptcy, so I travel the galaxy to release the agony, rearrange the anatomy to avoid the catastrophe, achieve cosmic morality. Time to embrace the duality is the only analogy that supersedes all we need, just so that we can let go and breathe. Just let go and breathe. So I touch heaven, skies 11, dreading the black sun's position, starts to enlist all men into an army of darkness. The mission? To create a prison planet that envisions lack. Victimhood never listened. The water drop in the sunlight glistens. Enter the prism. The vortex where time doesn't exist yet. Colors bombarding, creating friction, perplexed activity in my cerebral cortex. The question cannot be more complex, so vex experiences that will be more in the next life cycle. I recite all mantras and chants, breathe tantrically, lungs collapse, open all nerve cell synapse to receive the codes, archaic as Morse code, radio waves and gamma rays, the secret societies know, and have technology that go interstellar out of this world, raid the facilities, acquire the technology in stealth mode, take what belongs to humanity, pack the van with a full load, light speed down the road. Here to disclose all aspects of reality that will make souls grow. Resistance is futile, the earth is still fertile, the truth will drive the masses wild, but I still have a smile. As the rabbit hole is deep, the answers that we seek, the questions beneath the construct society is humanity's time to evolve and re-enter the days of old. Thank you, everyone.
That was incredible. Incredible. Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Thank you. That just put it all on the map. Thank you to all of you. Soraya, I don't think she's in the room. She's, is she not on live?
She's here.
There she is. Amazing job today, Soraya. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you, everybody. Did Alan leave us?
Do you feel a little bit high right now?
No, we can't hear you, Shreya.
Uh-oh.
I feel high right now.
I do.
I
really do. I'm not altered in any way from any physical substance, but all of the information really activated us today, for sure.
It's been a good day. All right. I love you all. Thank you so much. Kathleen, Adam, Grant, you guys have a beautiful night.
Beautiful.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bless you.
See you tomorrow. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. See you in the morning. Just quick schedule rundown of tomorrow. We have opening mass meditation with James Redfield, the author of the Celestine Prophecy. Then we have Eddie Stone, who is a conscious nutritionist. Dan Winter is going to be awesome presentation with Dan. And then we have Stephen Halpern, and the JJ and Desiree Hurtak is going to be hosting Stephen. We have Eric Lawyer, then Eric Rankin. And then in the afternoon, we have Michael Cremo. We're going to do a lot of ancient civilizations in the afternoon, actually, because we've done a lot of disclosure, a lot of spiritual work, but now we're going to go true world history. It's my favorite topic, guys. So tomorrow, starting the afternoon onwards, we're going to sound frequency in the midday, and then we're going true world history. Michael Cremo, forbidden knowledge, forbidden archaeology, Brad Olson, hidden anomalies in Antarctica, Jamie Janover, the sacred geometry and connection of ancient sites. And then we're going to end with Trisha McCannon and talk about a worldwide pyramid culture. And that's going to be the end of the day. And I'm going to invite all the speakers. Hopefully they can come back on at the end of the day, and we can all say bye to you and just go out with a big bang. So see you all then. Okay. Good night, everyone.